Okay, I think we are live. Good evening, everyone. Good evening and welcome. I am Todd Tabutis, Director of the Art Museum of West Virginia University. It's my great pleasure to be the host of this evening's program. And before I briefly introduce our guests, a couple of matters of Zoom housekeeping. First of all, this evening, we're not using the chat function on Zoom. We are using Q&A. So if anybody has any questions for anybody on screen this evening, please put your questions there. We'll get to them either at a particular point in the program or at the end as we have time. But do not use chat, use Q&A. Also, if you would like to avail yourself of captioning, we do have live captioning available. Please click that button on your screen and you should be able to access captioning.
Great.
I also want to express gratitude on behalf of the Art Museum for support from the Judith Gold Stitzel Museum Education Fund and the Grant and Lilly Museum Education Fund for tonight's program.
My name is Andrew Westover. I'm the Keith Haring Director of Education.
Oh. What was that?
Andrew Westover.
Sorry, I don't know where that sound came from. This program is held in conjunction with the Art Museum's current exhibition, True Colors, Picturing Identity, featuring selections from the James Cottrell and Joseph Lovett Collection. Both Jim and Joe are joining us tonight from their home in New York City, along with artist Deborah Kass, who is also joining us from Jim and Joe's home. A native of West Virginia, Dr. James Cottrell earned his Doctor of Medicine degree here at West Virginia University in 1968. A co-founder of the subspecialty of neurosurgical anesthesiology, he is currently Chairman Emeritus of Anesthesiology at SUNY Downstate Medical Center in Brooklyn. Jim received WVU Medicine's Distinguished Alumnus Award in 2002, and in 2010, he received the Distinguished Service Award from the American Society of Anesthesiologists in recognition of his extraordinary accomplishments in the field. Joseph Lovett is a Peabody Award-winning documentary filmmaker who produced Parents of Gays for CBS in 1977, the first gay-positive report for network television. After 10 years as a producer at ABC News 2020, he founded the production company Lovett Stories and Strategies in 1989. His most recent film, Children of the Inquisition, Their Story Can Now Be Told, was released in 2019. Together, they have been collecting art for more than 40 years. As a young couple living in the Soho neighborhood of Manhattan, Cottrell and Lovett grew their art collection based on their personal vision and vital friendships with artists. The pair was particularly active in Soho's booming art scene and engaged in activism around the HIV/AIDS epidemic. One of those artists they befriended is Deborah Kass, who explores the intersection of pop culture, art history, and identity through a feminist lens. She participated in the Whitney Museum Independent Studies program and studied at the Art Students League of New York and received her BFA from Carnegie Mellon University just up the road in Pittsburgh. Her honors include a mid-career retrospective at the Andy Warhol Museum in Pittsburgh in 2012, inclusion in multiple Venice Biennales, and the position of senior critic at the Yale University Painting Program. Kass's works can be found in the permanent collections of the Museum of Contemporary Art in San Diego and the Fogg Museum in Boston, as well as the Guggenheim Museum, Museum of Modern Art, the Jewish Museum, and the Whitney Museum of American Art, all in New York City, among other public and private collections, including the Cottrell and Lovett Collection. So with that, welcome Jim, welcome Joe, welcome Deborah.
Thanks, Todd.
And I'm so glad you're all here in one room, one house, so to speak. So what we're going to do is start with a little overview of the exhibition for folks who have not yet seen it, because we do have people joining us from outside of Morgantown. So True Colors, Picturing Identity is an exhibition that, as the title suggests, focuses on the idea of human identity and its multifarious forms. And every object in the show has a human form in one way or another. So this is the entrance to the exhibition. Jason Zay, my colleague, is working behind the scenes. Jason, would you advance the slide? This slide shows two works that are from Jim and Joe's collection. On the left, you see a large ink work by Keith Haring, and in the center is a cross, sculptural cross by Robert Mapplethorpe. What's interesting about this is you might think it doesn't have a figure in it, but it really does. When you stand in front of it, you get to see yourself. Also, you can sort of see reflected in this image, if you go to the next slide, four Andy Warhol prints that we borrowed from Jim and Joe, two of Mick Jagger on the left, and two prints from a series called Ladies and Gentlemen, which feature drag queens that Andy Warhol had photographs made of from a bar in New York City, or around from his studio, called the Gilded Grape. So those four prints are actually opposite Deborah's painting, which we'll see in a minute. Next slide, please. In addition to those works, we borrowed 2 works by David Hockney, including this very beautiful small print, which was made while he was still, I believe, in school. Next slide. This is a suite of 6 works by Barton Bennis. Barton Bennis was also a friend of Jim and Joe's, and hopefully we'll get to hear a little bit more about that friendship. These works all feature pills for their HIV medication pills that Barton Bennis, who was HIV positive, these are pills that he used in his to make the artwork. Next. And there is Deborah's painting. How do I look? Question mark. This is what it looks like on the gallery wall. But what I'm going to do is, if you show the next slide, there it is in its full glory. So Deborah, may I ask you about this painting?
Of course.
Please jump in.
Oh, I thought you had a question.
I guess that was it. Sorry. well, go ahead.
Why don't you set me up with a question, and then I could go.
Sure.
I promise.
Well, let me mention that I was very fortunate, and I saw you speak at a virtual conference well over a year ago now. And when you talked about this painting, you talked about your personal relationship to Gertrude Stein. So Gertrude Stein, who's depicted in this painting, which is your version of a Picasso portrait of Gertrude Stein. And I thought it was so compelling why your sort of personal story when you first saw that painting. So maybe that's a good way to.
That's a good jumping off point. It's actually a picture of a Picasso painting of Gertrude Stein. So it's a portrait of a Picasso and a portrait of Gertrude all at once. When I was a little kid, my father and I would go to museums now and then, and the Met was a favorite, mainly because he liked the armor and the Egyptian rooms. And we would sometimes walk through the painting galleries on our way to the armor or the Egyptian room. And I remember being a probably 8 or 9-year-old and being completely stopped in my tracks by this image of this person. Because even at that young age, I realized she looked nothing like all the other ladies I was passing through the galleries. She actually looked like a regular person. In fact, someone I might actually know. She looked a little like my grandparents, my grandmas. She was kind of big, wore dark clothes, looked very formidable, like both my grandmothers. And I was struck. So this is a painting about how do I look? It's called How Do I Look? And it's about seeing myself in art history and naming myself and who gets to see and who gets to name. So the image behind Gertrude is a sort of cartoon image of Courbet's Sleepers, which is a very sexy painting. I should know the date. I'm thinking it's 1850 something by Courbet, of 2 women, very post-coital, embracing on bed and sleeping. It's called The Sleepers. And then the image on the bottom left is a painting of a sculpture by Jasper Johns called The Critic Sees. So in all of this, I'm talking about seeing, naming, being, and how do I look?
Yeah, and it's part of a larger series which you called art history painting.
Right, it's part of a larger series called the Art History Paintings, which Jim and Joe are, I think, the only people who own any of them other than me. Yeah, I once sold another one, and I was so sorry that I did, that when that couple got divorced, I bought it back. So if Jim and Joe, if you ever get divorced, I'll pay you what you paid me. That's what, that's what I did with the other one. So yeah, and all of it is a reflection on the history of modernism, a lot about post-war painting through the lens of a sort of restorative feminist project.
I think you shouldn't count on getting this picture back after 45 years we've been together.
There's always hope. There's always hope.
That's what they all say.
So, Jason, if you go to the next slide, I think that's the same painting that's actually behind Jim right now. And
Right.
this is Call of the Wild for Pat Steer. Is that right, Deborah?
Correct.
And set from the same series.
Actually, it was the beginning of the series. It's probably the second one this is when I kind of nailed it and figured out what I was doing.
Oh,
So-
wow.
So it's like, there's one right before it, and then this one that really settled in my mind where I wanted to go.
Great.
Yeah.
Good. And we can see what it really looks like behind Jim's head as well. Because I think they're about 100 inches, right? They're long, they're big. These are big.
Yeah,
paintings.
maybe 90, something like that. I don't know exactly.
Yeah. Well, let's just go through a couple more slides of your work. Jason, if you want to go to the next one. So this is a different tack. This is a different group of paintings altogether. Gold Barbara, correct?
Correct.
Much closer to Warhol.
Well, but only about a year apart from, How Do I Look, I think. Maybe
Oh,
2 years apart or
Okay.
3 from the Pat Steer painting.
And these came from thinking about his paintings of Maryland, correct?
Right. Yeah, I had in the art history paintings, I was using Andy a lot. There's another painting Jim and Joe have that used Andy Warhol's dance steps. So, I was appropriating from male artists from art history. Andy, of course, came up and became, I used him, like I used John several times. I used Warhol several times. And in a sort of effort to be, well, actually, those paintings were specifically about my absence in art history. And I started to really wonder about my presence and what would my presence look like. It was a very active, articulated path I was on. Like one thing led to another, and my absence in 12 paintings led to what's my presence. And of course, my presence was always lurking in those paintings. But I wanted to address it specifically. So I was thinking, when's the first time I ever did see my presence out there in the real world in a way that I understood? And when did I first identify with a popular culture icon or figure? And it was not unlike being struck by Gertrude Stein at 8 or 9. I was struck by Barbra Streisand at 12 and 13.
I was going to say that's a direct lineage from Gertrude Stein to Barbra Streisand.
It's 100% to me. It's a straight shot. And, so Barbara was when I became, as I was a little more aware of the world at 12 and 13 than I was at 8. And I was extremely active in trying to figure it out, which I still am, trying to figure out the world. And I was an avid reader by that time, 13 or 12, of arts and leisure section on the Sunday Times in my voracious appetite for the world.
Sure.
And I didn't know that I'd been missing seeing myself in the world till I saw Barbra Streisand in the world. And an entire consciousness opened up the way it does when you identify yourself out there or with something outside of yourself in the world. And I believe that act of identification is one of the ways we really define and construct who we are as kids. So that's what so these paintings were called the Jewish Jackie series. And there we have it. I think I said it all.
No, that's great. That's great. And I have to admit, talking about the paintings that are in Jim and Joe's collection, it was very hard for the curator of the museum, Bob Bridges, and myself to narrow it down. We probably could have had a whole sub Deborah Cass gallery because of all the things you just said, Deborah. Why don't we just go through the next?
And this was 1992. This was
Right.
really 30 years ago,
Right.
before the words, if you can see it, you can be it, existed.
Right.
But this was about seeing it and I could be it. And literally I'd say to myself, if she can do it, I can do it. And that was in my head. So if she could do it with chutzpah and talent, I could do it with chutzpah and talent.
That's right. Well, let's go through the remaining slides. Jason, if you'll go to the next one. You did this fantastic one of Jim and Joe.
Oh, as they may or may not know, this was for what was the occasion of this?
It was somebody's birthday.
It wasn't an anniversary or something?
Jim's 50th birthday.
All right. And my then girlfriend, Diane, insisted that I do a portrait of them.
Mhm.
And I actually never done it before. I'd done the Barbaras, but I was, what year was this, you guys?
93.
Okay, so I was moving on with the Warhol project and starting to do Gertrude's other versions of Gertrude Stein and other people besides Barbara. And yeah, so this was a big experiment. And when I see it, I know what I would do different now, but it still came out really good.
Yeah.
And I did it under duress, you guys. You probably don't know that.
No, we don't, but we love Diane for it.
We love her for many reasons. This was one.
Well, and also every time I see this, I smile because you two are smiling so big. So, Jason, what's the next one? Oh, Oi, I should say. Oi, yo. And this is a monumental sculpture that is now permanent in front of the Brooklyn Museum, correct, Deborah?
It's correct.
And as a sculpture, because it's in the round, you can walk around it. So from one side it says yo and one side says oi. Yep, there's the next one. So Deborah, do you want to explain why one is now blue?
Yes. When the invasion of Ukraine started, actually somebody out of the blue wrote to info@deborahcass.com and info at the Brooklyn Museum saying, why don't you paint one of these letters blue in support of Ukraine? Because, I've been posting and I'm super political, of course. And, and I was kind of, oh, that's nice. Someone thinks it's like painting a car, but not just a car you'd have to deinstall, take somewhere by a truck and repaint it. And most museums are in a position to, like, on a dime, spend a bunch of money and do that. But it was really a good idea. So, and Brooklyn Museum, there was a little back and forth with me and the guy, and I CC'd everybody, I replied all. And he said, well, do you have a contact with anyone directly there, blah, blah, blah. And he mentioned a curator who hasn't been there for over a year. So I thought, oh, he really doesn't know how this works. And I'm going to write a nice Dear John thing. And basically some info at Brooklyn, who now I know is someone named Taylor, wrote back, said, we love this idea. Let's think about it.
Oh, good.
So I never had to write my Dear John. And basically, once I got that from info at Brooklyn, it just, like good ideas, I knew it had to be a Christo. The entire thing from that email, which was 10 o'clock on a Monday night, the next day, the curator and I went over to a fabric store in downtown Brooklyn. She picked me up in the car. We bought all this fabric for like $0 a yard. It was super cheap fabric. The conservator went to Home Depot. I'd sourced the rope, blue rope. So she went and got that. We got the material. The next morning we showed up on Wednesday and the whole staff was there. The conservator people really figured out how to tie it. And we spent a few hours wrapping it, and the entire project was finished from the buying of it in less than 24 hours.
That's
and
remarkable.
It cost less than $175 to do.
Well,
And it's held up through these windstorms and everything. And you can come and my sister lives across the street. She went over and just sort of moved. A little yellow was showing. She went over and moved it.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Well, it's a fantastic gesture, and I think it's it's immediately to your point. Not only did it happen quickly, but I think it's it's immediately resonant, right, Deborah? Like it
really was resonant, and I sent word out to Stanford that feel free to wrap the O if you want to do it. You've got my approval. I don't think they have done it, but it was sometimes things just pull together quick, and they're the right thing, and this was that.
Well, Jason, if you don't mind stopping the PowerPoint, we'll see everybody a little bigger. And there's also an OIO right behind you, Deborah. Jim and Joe have a small
Yes,
version. They have a
they
small
do.
version sitting on their kitchen counter. So Deborah's been talking about her fantastic career, and you have known her for how long? How did you meet, Deborah?
That's Joe's cue.
Yeah, just
What's it? We were very, very close friends with Debbie's former girlfriend, Diane Cleaver. And Diane was coming out one weekend, it's about 40 some odd years ago, to the beach. And she said, do you mind if I bring this girl I've been seeing? So we said, fine. And so
Here it
in
comes.
walked Debbie Cass with her dog Jasper, and who was a lovely dog. And Debbie was concerned that our German Shepherd, who was also a lovely dog, was going to eat her dog. And she was quite anxious the entire weekend and not terribly pleasant to be with.
Hang on, I knew this was coming. My dog was not fixed and extremely aggressive.
He was still
And
a very
although he was like 25% the size of Max, was Max or
Max.
Sam?
Oh,
It was
no.
Max.
same.
My dog would go after any male dog. So it was really that. It wasn't, there was a reason he'd gotten into.
I
mean, he was
understand.
bad.
You had concerns about it, but Jasper was an absolute gentleman. Anyway, we hoped that this would not last because this woman was very, very anxious making. And however, it was true love, and we had to convert. And if Diane loved her, we loved her. And we've had 40 some odd years of tremendous friendship and sharing of ideas, and been on the inside when she's been doing work that's been very exciting for us. And we've had, an opportunity to be a small part of her career, and that's been very exciting.
I've had a lot of friendships with collectors, but they usually start with my work and then we become friends. These two guys, it's really been, despite the dog problem, we were friends first. And
Right.
then we, right, Jim? I mean, it's the only relationship I have with people that went maybe that's not, it really went the other way. And they've been incredibly supportive all these years.
Which is
Yeah.
remarkable. And how many works do you have, Jim?
Oh, I don't know. I can't remember that. I wouldn't tell Deb because she might want them back.
Only if you get divorced.
Okay. Listen, the first time I went to Debbie's show, it was at Baskerville, Watson, and bought Hudson River. That was in 1983. So what year did we meet?
It was the first year we had the house. I think it was 80 or 81.
I think 81, because
81,
80,
yeah.
I was trying to remember, it was 81.
It was
So-
81.
so
Summer.
It was shortly after meeting her that, well, no, it was 2 years. And then, we started to like her more, and then we saw her show. And I said, anyone who can do something like this, you got to like. So then
Despite me, despite
we started.
my rotten personality.
we
So-
started going
So
to-
Jim, what is it about her? What is it about her work what was that aha for you then?
Well, why don't you go back to How Do I Look?
Oh, Jason,
Sam, honey, that was the first show at Baskerville was the landscape paintings.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's way, yeah,
We got the rocks at that maybe.
yes.
Anyhow, if you're a lover of art, go back to How Do I Look, the first one. If you're a lover of art, now look at this painting.
What do
I
you
mean, my God, it's got everything anybody could possibly want from a piece of art. It's got color, it's got figures, it's got art history, got a theme of gay and lesbian, which at that time I was just coming out. And so we had Gertrude Stein, we had Courbet, and we had Jasper Johns. And look at that painting around those glasses. I mean,
Yeah.
what a painter. And look at the figures. I mean, it's just wonderful the way she puts a piece together. And so I continued to look at, and I loved it just for individual parts of it, as well as the whole that she talked about.
right.
Yeah. But Debbie has a remarkable command of art history, and I've heard her lecture a number of times, and I've always been so impressed by her depth of knowledge and the way she can put things together. And because I'm not that well versed on things, and I've learned so much from her, both watching her as an artist, but also, listening to her as a teacher. And it's always impressive, always impressive.
Have you ever gone to shows together, a museum show or a gallery show? Have you ever done that?
Yeah, of course.
We must have.
Yeah.
It's hard to remember anything before the last 2.5 years.
Tell me
Right,
about
that's true.
Like, was there life? Did we do things? Did we go out?
Yes.
We
Yes.
went to openings. She introduced us to a couple of artists.
Mhm.
And there's one young artist now that we love that was a student of Deborah's.
Who is that?
Oh my gosh, I don't know if we should say.
Why don't we-
Duran Langberg.
Oh, Duran Langberg. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, he was your student. Okay, great. Do you mind switching gears back to Barton Bennis to talk about your friendship with?
Sure.
Yeah, Jason, can you pull up the AIDS pills slide? And I'll just, whoever, Jim or Joe, if you want to sort of talk about how that, because that was another deep friendship that you had, and Barton is no
Yeah.
longer with us.
Right. Yeah. Well, I met Barton when we were in our 20s, early 20s, and I had invited I'm from Rhode Island, and a friend had moved here, and I invited her for dinner, and she said, "Would you mind if I brought this fellow that appeared in my house in France one day, and stayed for a couple of months?" And I said, "He's a lovely guy." So I said, "Of course." And it was Barton, who was this wild guy, brilliant artist, and a wonderful friend, a wonderful person who became a wonderful friend. And Barton was, so we must have met around 1968, 69.
Oh,
And he was an extraordinary risk taker. And as people were trying new things at that time, in terms of drugs, sex, adventure, Barton was trying everything. And it was quite worrisome and scary to me, because I used to have to say to myself, Barton could do those things. If I tried those things, I'd be dead. And he was immensely creative. I did a little film on Barton called No Secrets, just like I also did a film on Debbie and her, and one on her present wife, Patricia Cronin. And they were profiles for a television show that was on at the time. And Barton, Laurel Reuter, who's the curator, or is just stepping down as curator at the North Dakota Museum of Art, said that what was fascinating about Barton is that if you saw any one of his pieces, you would think, "Oh, isn't that cute? Isn't that clever?" Some people thought of them as cartoony. But she said, if you looked at them as a body of work, you realize what an extraordinary perspective he had on our ever-changing culture, and which is exactly the case. And when he graduated from art school, he went to Pratt. He had been a painter, and he took a trip to Africa as a graduation present to himself, and was in the Ivory Coast. And he was so impressed by how the local people created art out of detritus, that nothing was left to waste. And everything was being made out of bottle caps or discarded paper, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That he came back and he abandoned painting for the most part, and became, I guess for lack of a better word, a collagist. And people would gather things from all over the world and mail them to him. And so he had his studio was a fascinating place to be. He would have file drawers labeled with things like, he would have things like a napkin that Nancy Reagan had patted on her lips after eating at a restaurant in LA that somebody had grabbed. He had, when I first met Barton, he was creating sculpture out of somebody's funeral ashes. And then he later used our dog's funeral ashes and made sculptures out of that. And a lot of his work was very political against the Vietnam War, and then and very gay identified with a lot of it. And then, of course, he got very, very involved in the AIDS crisis. Now, these pieces are very interesting. What had happened when he started to work with AIDS paraphernalia, he had HIV and he was cooking something and he cut himself and was bleeding all over the place. And Barton was a rather nervous, anxious person. And he was terrified that there was all this AIDS-infected blood in the kitchen. And he's running around trying to get bleach and towels and everything to clean it up. And then suddenly he stopped and he realized, wait a second, that's my blood. I don't have to worry about that. And when he realized how totally crazed he was at the idea of this blood that was not dangerous, any more dangerous to him than anything else, he started to understand the terror that the world was facing. And he started, and Barton's theme was to always demystify taboo. And so he went about creating playful objects or silly objects or incongruous objects from AIDS paraphernalia. So this set of pieces is called Jack and Jill Have AIDS. And so it's, these or Nancy, Dick, and Jane have AIDS. I think that's what it is.
Sally, Dick, and Jane.
Sally, Dick, and Jane. So it's a first grade primer, and you have these illustrations that people are familiar with, but these kids are sweeping up AIDS pills. He also did one called Poison Dart, where he had a poison dart that was filled with AIDS blood splattering on the thing. He had a pacifier with AIDS blood. These shocking images that really made you think, and that's the kind of work that he did.
And you have so many of his works.
Well, Barton, unlike Debbie, whenever he came to the house, he would never come without a painting that was just his nature. He always was giving. And so we had an enormous amount of his work, which has been a lot of fun. Whoops, I'm running out of battery. Hey, Eli, can you make sure this is plugged in?
Joe's gonna fade. We don't want him to fade.
And the dog is there.
So
there was one really good scene of Barton. He was invited to Sweden to give a show on his
Oh my God, yeah.
during the AIDS period. So he did a bunch of the poison darts and the pacifiers and a bunch of pills and in the shape of skulls and those sorts of things. And so somehow word got out and they confiscated all of his work when it came into the country. And they said it was contaminated blood and that they couldn't have that come into the country.
Oh, I see.
Can you imagine? This is blood that's old, and they confiscated it. But he smiled and said, as soon as they released it, I sold them all.
That's unlike a little PR to raise your prices, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So the two of you you've talked about how you've acquired works from auctions in the 80s and the 90s, right? You were sort of active in that collecting as it relates to the AIDS pandemic, right?
No, we were never very active in auctions because we got our work from artists and from
Oh, you did? Okay.
gallery owners and people that we heard about on the street. And it's rare that we would go and actually bid for some, maybe one or two.
Okay.
But I think what Todd's referring to is that we did buy some wonderful pieces at benefit auctions for AIDS. And one of them, the Gay Men's Health Crisis, had their first benefit auction for AIDS. I think it was in '92, was it, Jim? And we were able to buy a piece of Basquiat's who was getting well known at that time, for like $1,500.
He's behind Deborah there in her shadow.
Is
Yeah,
that the one you got at the auction?
Yeah.
yeah,
There it
See,
is.
yeah.
A lot of Cindy Sherman's and who's Terry Winter's wife?
She's not an artist.
No, okay. Another photographer. And
Oh, and we have Cindy Sherman on loan here for the show, and if there's anybody else that we didn't mention from the collection, Hockney.
Dana Schutz.
Oh, and Dana Schutz, right? And you've got another Dana Schutz behind you, Joe, right? Or Jim,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
On
Mhm.
the, okay.
That's the first one we got.
So, I mean, how did you start? I feel like this is the softball question for those younger folks in the audience who may not even know how one starts collecting art. So how did you start? How did you get into collecting? What struck that chord?
Well, we really didn't start out to be collectors. We started to see art and liked it, and then we met people. And the more people we met, the more we decided we'd like to support them. Because in those days, in the late 70s, early 80s, artists needed to make a living. So if we saw something, then we'd start to buy it. And I remember the first time that we were called collectors was in Orlando when Sue Scott curated our first show there. Sort of, it was about 50 or 100 pieces of art, and we had no idea we had that much art. And somebody said, "You're collectors." And I said, "Oh my God, we are." So it was the first time.
Right. And how big is the collection now?
It's about 720 pieces.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
and I've had the great pleasure of being invited into your home on more than one occasion and seeing art as you can see behind everybody in this. But you recently just rotated everything, right? You just changed over the.
We did. We sent some to you. We sent some to NYU's Gray Art Gallery, and both shows look wonderful. And your show is just amazing. If those who haven't seen it should go to the gallery, because it's really well placed and there's good space, and you can really spend time reviewing and looking at each of the paintings and pictures, and it's just terrific. Thank you, Todd.
Well, thank
And
you.
Bob.
Yeah, no, and Bob's somewhere. He's watching somewhere in the ether. But I mean, your generosity for loaning to us has been remarkable. And you know, we are a young museum. We'll turn 7 this summer. So Jim, what is that like to have work come back to your alma mater?
It's really wonderful, you know, because when I was there, you wouldn't dare think about having an art exhibit like you put up there on display today.
Really?
You weren't even allowed to approach those topics. So it's just wonderful that it's there and it's open and no one is, you know, what do you call it? Protesting the exhibit. And so it's wonderful. Thank you again.
Yeah, no, we're delighted. And you know, when we were having conversations with you about the exhibition, there's so much work that speaks to exactly what Deborah was saying at the beginning, like this sort of at the core of these works, there's an expression of who am I, of inserting yourself into the picture, of inserting yourself into a story, of, you know, and I feel like there's so many works in your collection that do that.
Can I speak to that a little bit? Just
Please,
to add to some of the stuff that Debbie was saying. You know, when I was a kid, if you saw a Black person in a magazine, you were reading Ebony or Jet. Black people were not seen in the mainstream, in print, and certainly not in TV, except for maybe Amos and Andy. Jews were certainly all in entertainment, but except for Molly Goldberg in the 50s, you know, they were certainly not presented as Jews. They were presented as high wasps. You know, we had a society that had a homogeneous veneer, which was white and
Christian
and
Straight.
straight, of course. And so for people who didn't fit into that, you know, as Debbie says, you know, where was I? You know, why aren't I pictured? And so it's been very interesting to have grown up during this time and to see how people have changed that view of our culture and have started to accept, and I think we've just started to accept the diversity of this, extraordinary population that we all live in. And but it's weird not being in a way when you're not there, when you walk through a landscape and the landscape says, no, none of this is you. In fact, does that mean, in a way, are you? So it's I think your exhibit is very important. It's really very important.
And I think we have to remember that diversity is not just black and brown, it's disability and LGBTQ as well.
For sure.
And a lot of other things.
Yeah, a lot of other things.
So, well, given this time span of when all three of you met and started collecting and have had this fantastic friendship and are now on the screen together. So for Deborah, for an artist, what's it like to sort of see your work kind of go through these different contexts? I mean, in some ways it's still sort of doing the same job it maybe had to do at the beginning, but I don't want to put words into your mouth for that. I mean, do you have a perspective?
What's it like to be old?
I wasn't saying that, not quite, but I mean to see your work appear in different ways.
Is it relevant now, you're asking? Is there art relevant, the political part of it?
Well, of course. But I'm still, I mean, those are really big questions. And it's to start with being old, let's start there.
That wasn't my question.
Well, if you're gonna work, whatever you do in life, and you spend enough decades doing it, things change, the world changes, your relationship to the world changes, and you do different, if you're an artist, bodies of work. If you're my kind of artist, which is someone who does not rely on, my subject is not my process, which a lot of painters, that is the case. My subject actually is the world and my place in it. So once I figured that out in about 1989 in that painting behind Jim, I've been pretty much on the same road. It's just a matter of different ways of approaching the same topic. And what's different is there are things that are the same as 30 years ago and things that are different than 30 years ago. Oddly, I'm still incredibly marginalized, even though I'm incredibly visible. So, and sadly, I still make a tiny percentage of what my male colleagues I literally went to school with and showed in my first gallery with and showed in my second gallery with, the financial discrepancies in terms of value. So those things have not changed much.
Right.
And that is really pathetic. And I was always angry. And that's never changed. But my bodies of work have developed in different ways. So, but it does that answer the question, Todd?
Sure. And I mean, I was also just thinking about how your work appears, like it's now in a show in West Virginia with artists who weren't making work at that time. So how does that feel when you
what do you mean artists who aren't making work in the early, who aren't as old as I am, who are younger?
Yeah, I mean, to see your work appear in new contexts, right? Does that drive you?
Well, painting shows is not a new context; it's an old context, and they just keep buying work. Sometimes like Duran, my student, who's terrific, and I adore his work, so I'm happy to see that. And then Dana Schutz was Patty's student, so that's fun.
I didn't know that.
At Columbia.
Oh, wow.
No, wait, maybe I got that wrong. She was on admissions at Columbia and, wrong. Patty was on the admissions committee to make sure, and made sure Dana got into the program. We met Dana when we were visiting Skowhegan and Dana had just finished undergrad. I forgot where she went, but we went to her studio and we thought she was terrific. And then Patty happened to be on admissions at Columbia when Dana applied. So that was the story. If she was here, I'd say, right, Patty? She's watching, right, Patty? But it's always fun to see your work in different places.
Right.
No matter what, it's great.
Well, and we're really happy to see it here. I mean,
Thank you.
they're gonna have to pry it out of our hands to send it back to New York. I just want to remind the audience out in the world, if Patty's watching, whoever has a question that's, if Patty's always wanted to ask Deborah something that's never been asked before,
Sure that won't come up.
through the Q&A. So if people want to put questions there, please do. So you've mentioned Duran Langberg. You're still collecting, you're still buying, you're still looking. And this question could be for you too, Deborah. Who out there besides Duran, are there other folks that you're looking at, other artists? Are you sort of still collecting in the same way?
Jim?
It takes more for me to see something that I truly love. I see a lot of art now. And so it's hard for me to find something that I really love that has something that gets me. Either the shape, the colors, the political atmosphere. So it's very difficult at this point in my life. But there still are people I like. And I like this new group of gay painters that have sort of bound together, and like Solomon Tour has come up at the Frick along with Doran. And there's another one that we met with Doran, but I can't remember his last name. Joe, do you remember?
Anthony.
Anthony Cudahy?
Yeah. So those are all really great artists.
I'm surprised you haven't said Jennifer Packard, Jim.
Oh, I love Jennifer Packard, but I consider her well established.
She was, I think, in the same class as Duran.
Boy, that's amazing. She
Well, you
is,
can see the connection between their work.
right, but she's so mature. It's unbelievable.
And her show is just about to close at the Whitney, or it's still up, I think.
I don't know, but
Yeah.
it's a wonderful
It's
show.
up. Yes, it's up, Todd. It is up.
Right.
Yeah, you're
You know,
right.
you asked Todd, you asked about collecting and how you get into it. Our artist friends have been extraordinarily influential in Jim is the collector. I'm not a collector. And our artist friends have been extraordinarily influential in tutoring him and thereby me as well, and showing us new people and stuff like that. Like Debbie introduced us years ago to Alexis Rockman, who's a friend of hers, somebody whose work that we've enjoyed.
McClellan.
Pardon?
I think Deb introduced me to Suzanne McClellan a long
Yeah.
time ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And Roland Flexner, who's a very dear friend, used to take Jim every weekend. They would go to galleries, and Jim would visit him in when he was going back to his hometown of Nice in France, and opened him up sort of like to French painters. Actually, a lot of our original, the first stuff that we were buying was young French painters. And Jim always had a sense of responsibility. He was a physician and making a lot more money than painters or filmmakers, and he always he was very genuine and wanted to help support people's work. And it's made a huge difference. I mean, I would never have had the career I had if it wasn't for Jim's support. And he has certainly helped other people.
Well, it's a real commitment to the artist, right? It's as someone once told me, when you buy a work of art, you're actually investing in the next work of art, right? Like you're paying it forward. You're making sure that artist can continue working.
Well, some people we've noticed collect from a Chinese menu, one from item.
Jim and Joe are old-fashioned collectors. They are definitely of a generation that collected in exactly the way they're describing. And other dear friends of mine had, interestingly, also in the medical profession, had a really similar idea about collecting in the 80s and 90s. The market really changed, and collecting has really changed.
Sure.
Yeah.
This is really old school.
Yep.
In the best way. I mean that as like that's what you want. That's hard to find now, because art became a asset class in 2008. Right. So if we hadn't already been there, which a lot of collectors already had been there, it's really a different enterprise now.
Right. No, for sure.
Yeah, it went from art to the art world to the art market, to the art industry. Right.
I'm glad Deborah stuck with it because she's given so much to the world.
Oh, thanks, Jim.
Yeah.
That's true.
So
Wait a minute. Wait till you see my NFT.
I have no doubt.
Oh, yeah.
well, I want to give folks, we're almost 50 minutes here, 51 minutes. So if there are questions, I don't see any questions in the Q&A. So I don't think I'm missing any. And I had a question and it went out of my head. This is where I feel like a bad host. Oh, I remember. For the collectors in the group, is there something that got away, or an artist that you were like, oh shoot, we really should have gotten that when we could have?
Oh yeah.
That's Joe.
Oh yeah.
Who's that?
Well, I have never been a fan of Andy Warhol's. I was always rather political, and I felt that he never used during Vietnam and all of that. And I felt that he never used the podium that he was perched on to help the struggle. And I felt the same way about Lichtenstein as well. And but after Andy died, a gentleman that worked with him a great deal came over to our house with a series of paintings that he was selling extremely cheap, and I obviously I knew that they would go up in value, but I just didn't feel right, like just buying it just because it would go up in value, which was really stupid. I mean, really, really, really stupid. So we passed up several, Marylands and hamburgers and that kind of stuff.
I never heard that story. Why didn't you call me?
I should have.
You should have called me.
Yeah. And there are also times actually during the beginning of AIDS when people were dying and selling stuff, and some people were demented and selling stuff. And again, people would say, so and so's selling this, and but they were out of their minds, and you would feel like a vulture. I would have felt like a vulture.
We could have had a lot of Basquiat drawings along those lines, but I wouldn't do it. I just couldn't do it.
Yeah. Well, Jim and Joe, you two are extremely generous to have loaned your collection to us. It's been great to get to know you both and to get to know the collection. And Deborah, we haven't met personally, but I do hope that there'll be an opportunity to join in the fun, because this group looks like they always have fun together. I understand you're all having fun together after this, so thank you. As Jim already did the promo to say, come to see the exhibition before it closes. We close on May 15th, which is commencement weekend here at WVU. We're open Thursday through Sunday, 12:30 to 6 p.m. Always free. So if you haven't seen the show yet, please do. All the galleries are open. We will have a program next Friday. 2 Fridays? April 1st. Is that 2 Fridays from now? 2 Fridays from now.
Yeah, 2 Fridays.
On April 1st, Brad Grimes, one of our colleagues at the LGBTQ Center here at WVU, is going to do a noontime talk about the works in True Colors. So hopefully everybody can register for that webinar. It's both in person and hybrid. So folks who are away can watch it on Zoom. And if you're here in Morgantown and want to join us and feel comfortable doing so, you're welcome to come hear what Brad has to say, his perspective on looking around True Colors. And then we are going to have a closing reception at present. It's planned for April 29th from 5 to 7 p.m. That's a Friday. Because of COVID, we didn't have an opening, but we do think it'll be a nice, fingers crossed, it'll be a good spring day. We can have a tent on the terrace and we can celebrate the closing of the reception. All barring no other craziness with COVID right now. So, Deborah, it's been a delight. Thank you for joining us this evening. And yeah, I'm really happy. And Joe and Jim, both of you, your generosity is it's felt. And I want to. Oh wait, there is a question.
Oh my God.
See for all that. Oh, it's a comment from a colleague, Jennifer Jordan, here in the College of Creative Arts, who you've met. So good to see you, Jim and Joe. Thank you so very much for your time and generosity sending you love. So there are other people here who wish we could all be going to dinner. So
Okay.
great. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and see you soon. Thank you all.